Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Shift Mastermind series. Today, we are on number 7, Pricing Ahead of the Market, Seller Pricing Strategies. And I'm really excited today that we have as our guest panelists, Jalayne Forrester, Scott Poncetta, and Dan Sullivan. So we're going to talk about how to price your home, how to price your listing for the market. And this information will also help you when you're ready to write an offer for your buyer. Now, this particular market is really crazy in that it's something, we're in a period of time that has never happened before. So I'm really excited to hear what our panelists have to say. So Jalayne Forrester is an ALC member. She is one of the founding members of KW Bay Area Estates. She used to be the productivity chair, so a lot of the training that you see is something that Jalayne had played a really big, important part in creating that program here in our office. She is a beloved mentor and faculty member. Now, Dan Sullivan, he is a member of the Rose Group, a partner of the Rose Group, and they are oh my God, I forgot the word. What is it that you guys are with all the different?
Expansion.
That's right. They are a very successful expansion team in several counties. And Dan is really fluent in numbers and analyzing the market and to see where prices should land. Scott Poncetta, he has been in the business for, is it over 20 years, Scott?
Out that right now, yeah.
Awesome. So Scott is he is not only a real estate agent, but he's also a real estate investor, and he advises his clients from that perspective. So he does commercial and he does real estate. And he is also one of our top producers. So I'm really glad to have everybody here. So you guys, I want to just start off with, what are you noticing in the market with the way that prices are being affected right now? So Jalayne, would you like to go first?
Sure. Thank you, Edith, for that lovely introduction. Appreciate it.
Welcome.
Yeah, so I have been just noticing, obviously, the change in how many new listings going on. I've noticed some interesting pricing. I haven't seen a lot of huge price reductions. I mean, I think people are really, I think sellers and the sellers that I'm speaking to 3 sellers pricing 3 different properties right now, all single family homes. And I think people are really of the mind that once this shelter in place is lifted, it's going to be business as usual. And they're prepared to, they're really prepared to go on at the current prices that we've seen prior to this COVID-19 happening. So it's interesting. I think it's unfolding as we speak. That's what I keep telling when I talk to clients. I keep telling them that we really don't know. Although the stories we've been hearing of people getting a lot of offers before this or as the shelter in place was happening. And then Jamicha's story of his clients accepting a $200,000 price decrease. They went out at 1.2 and they sold at 1 million. So I think it's unfolding. So that's what I'm seeing is that I'm actually anxious to hear what other panelists are saying because I don't know.
Right. Well, I think that's really good information that you've given us so far, because I know that you're pricing for a listing right now. So thank you for that. Dan?
Yeah, pretty similar to what she said. So, I like you said, I'm a huge numbers person. I was a finance major in college, and I pull stats on the weekly. And that's, for all the counties in the area. And surprisingly enough, there hasn't really been a blip in prices or the number of sales. Our inventory is still going up a little bit. And surprisingly enough, last year in April of 2019, we had 530 price reductions throughout the month. As of this morning, when I pulled the stats, we have 194, and that's in Santa Clara County. And so we're actually on pace to do less than we did last year. So, I mean, that just kind of shows that, you know, stuff isn't necessarily being price reduced. Now, you also have to keep in mind that the days on market aren't going up right now. So that could also affect part of that. But the prices are also higher than they were last month and the month before. So, I mean, based on what I'm seeing, there are stuff that's selling under ask, but there's also stuff that's selling, you know, at decent prices. And that's just simply because of the lower inventory, which compared to last year, we're about 200 less than we had last year in April.
So the ones that are selling, have they, do those prices match what the market was like before we went into shelter?
So if you look at, I mean, technically when I pull it on the month, and it's the end of the month that I pull it. So if you look at February's prices, our average closed sale price, and this is for single family, townhouse, and condo, for the month of February was 1.3, almost exactly 1.3 million. And the sale to list price was 103%.
Oh, wow.
All of last month, which was March, and you could kind of consider that most of those, or, you know, maybe about half of them were already in contract in February, and they closed, you know, around the middle of March when we were starting to go in the shelter in place. And those averages were 1.42, with an average sale to list price of 4.6% over asking. And we're actually at 3.5% right now, as of, you know, the 15th of April, which is halfway through. With an average sale price of 1.445. So it's still, you know, on the uptick. You know, even though we are in this situation, I think people still want to buy. And I'm seeing a lot of people, and I actually, you know, a couple of weeks ago when this started going into play, I actually thought that this was going to have a pretty big downturn in the market. And up to this point, it sure doesn't seem like it really is. I think stuff is still selling under, but I think those are the things that would have typically sold under, because, I mean, I'm still seeing stuff selling over asking. Things are still getting multiple offers. So it's seeming like it's still pretty strong.
Wow, that's awesome. Thank you. And you definitely know your numbers. Just, you know, just putting them out there like that, I'm really
Well, I'm looking
myself,
at it on my
right?
other monitor, so I'm not a total brain whiz.
Well, thank you so much. I
You
really
bet.
appreciate that. Scott, so what are your thoughts right now on what's happening?
Yeah, well, thank God for Dan and his numbers, huh?
I know, right?
Yes.
I'm not a stats guy, but I haven't noticed a downtick either in the market personally. I actually listed 2 properties almost like the day we went into SIP, and I marketed both of them just a little below what I thought what they should go for. Both of them ended up selling. We'll be closing them both in the next couple of weeks. And I've got a couple of active buyers, or a handful. A few of them have just said, we're waiting till this is done.
Right.
But the other ones are keeping me current on what's happening, at least in the markets they're interested in. And I'm not seeing a downturn in pricing right now. Now, depending upon how long this goes, that could change, I think. But
Yeah.
Currently, I'm just not seeing it. You know, things are priced, I think, either right where they should be. Maybe some people are even pricing a little bit high, but most things that I see are actually priced right about where I think they should be.
Oh, that's great. So
yeah,
the
you know,
listings
I mean-
that you had, Scott, I'm sorry to interrupt, but the listings that you did have, what was the activity that you had on those?
It was limited. You know, it was right after this came out. Like, these were listed on March 15th and March 17th.
Wow.
Yeah,
Scott, on
right
both
there.
of those, did you, how many showings do you think you had on either of them?
I know exactly how many I have. And not many. You know, I had like three on each.
Yep. And how many offers did you get?
Just one on each.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's the pretty similar. So we had one that I think we listed about 4 days after the shelter in place. And we had 4 showings and we got 1 offer. And I think that's, I mean, if you think about it, that's an amazing ratio of showings to offers.
Yes.
I mean, that just means that the people that are seeing the houses are just super serious. You know, they're not loafing around and, just going to check out neighbors' houses. It's no, I actually want to buy a house right now. That's why I'm putting myself at, so-called risk of going outside.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Well, also, both of mine were vacant at that time.
Oh, okay.
In fact, this is a strategy that I used, is that on one of them, it was vacant. It was an investor property. But on the other one, I had my clients move into a hotel for 10 days before we even knew that you could do that or should do that. But I try and do that anyway with my clients. And sometimes I offer to pay for that just so that it's easy to show, it's easy to see. It always looks perfect, because to me, we're going to get around to that, but making the property look perfect is a huge part of the strategy behind pricing.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Thank you. So now I'm going to go back to gallery view here. All right. So thank you guys for that information that you had shared right then. So Andy, I just saw Andy's picture.
I know. It popped up when I was talking, and I almost like busted up laughing. A little distracting.
I know, right? So then now let's talk about pricing. Let's talk about how to price ahead of the market, what that means, and what your strategies are as far as pricing. And then after that, then we'll talk about how you communicate this with your clients and what's important to know about that. So Jalayne, would you like to start?
Sure. So in talking with my sellers currently, I've been focusing with them on obviously where we were before all of this, and I've been updating them as we go along, and we're probably going to be ready to list a lot of these in just as hopefully in May when this SIP is lifted. But what I've been telling them is the old strategy of just price just under what we think we want to be, or whatever. Obviously looking at their motivation, what their number is, talking to them about opportunities. What we used to do in pricing is just to cast that wide net. What Dan and Scott mentioned that we really aren't, that I don't think is going to exist for a while. So I think we really need to focus on, or I'm focusing on, what their goals are, creating a net sheet for every price point we're talking about, so that they could, because I think people really believe that when they think of a price, they're not accounting for what that actually means as a net number. Mm-hmm. So that's part of my strategy, is I give them three varying potential sales prices. And then we discuss from there, what the outcome is likely to be pricing low. In this market, I think buyers are going to be very price sensitive. They're going to feel like it's an opportunity to get a price under market value or undervalue. So I'm cautioning my sellers against pricing low, because it could in fact backfire on them. So I'm actually encouraging them to look at getting the price at the hot property in the best condition, vacant for sure, absolutely for sure. Before, that was always my strategy. I would encourage that, but wouldn't really require that. This time I'm like, no, you can't be in the house. Mm-hmm. And then not underpricing, not going too aggressive with the pricing, because I believe that buyers are going to be thinking 5 to 10%. That's the number we keep hearing, 5 to 10% below list in this shift. Mm-hmm. So I'm encouraging my sellers to price at a dollar amount that they would accept. That's been my strategy so far.
Mm-hmm. That's wonderful.
We'll see. That could change next week. Who knows?
Right. Right. Especially with this market, right? That's what's going on, is that things can change, because as the shelter gets longer, then more things are changing. So Dan, what are your thoughts on that?
So actually what you just said brings up a super, super big point that, I think a lot of people, if they're not doing this, is super important, and it's staying current on everything. Like I said, I'm a huge numbers guy, and I pull stats weekly. If I pulled stats from June of last year and I started talking about those stats, it would be totally irrelevant. And I mean, even if you go back to February, it's changed pretty drastically. So just making sure you're current on all that stuff. But I mean, it really comes down to, I print out all the, the solds, what they sold for, what they were listed for, how long they were on the market, and just simply show it to the seller. You know, if things are selling about 5% over asking, then we want to take what we think we can get and subtract 5% from it. And then that would put us at right about where we think we need to be competitiveness wise, while still staying in that, you know, fairly decent days on market, because the longer it goes to days on market, obviously the lower price you're going to get. And then just also showing them, you know, that's kind of the good side of it. And then also showing them the bad side of it. So I don't know if you guys know, but you can actually go into the MLS and type in homes that have had a price reduction and pull those stats from those. So I pulled the ones that were price reduced in February. And of the, was it 500 homes or 600 homes listed in February, 94 of them had price reductions. And of those 94, they got an average of 6% under asking. And that's the final list price. So that means they reduced it down and then they got another 6% below that. Versus the ones that sold in February or that listed in February and have already sold, they sold an average of 5% over. So that's a 10% difference.
Does that data show the time period of when the price reduction was made?
Do you want to allow me to share my screen?
Yeah.
All right.
I think you can just share, right?
You should just be able to share.
There you go.
Can you guys see it?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So if you go to matrix search and you can type in, I always just leave this as blank, because if you click on it, then it ends up, you guys can see my mouse, right?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So if you leave this blank, then you can just go down to list price decreased and you can actually type the date, or you can choose a time frame. So you can see from the 1st to the 15th of April, and then you can type in Santa Clara County. There's been 75 price reductions so far as of this month. And so what I looked at is I say, okay, homes that sold from a list date of 2/1/2020 plus, there was only 2 of them that have sold that have listed after February 1st that had a price reduction. Oh, sorry, I gotta take this date out. Anyways, you guys get the idea.
Yeah, that's great.
But yeah, so you can basically just look against and show them if we end up pricing too high, then this is what's going to happen. So you kind of show them the good of what's happening right now, and then you show them the bad of if we overprice, this is what's going to happen. And you can show that you'll get an average of about 5% under ask.
So how much time do you look at when you're doing your CMA to figure out pricing? Like, you know, do you go back 3 months, but during right now, are you only going back 2 months, 1 month? What are you doing?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what it is. I mean, I've always learned to go back 90 days, you know, unless it's more of a different property, you know, maybe it's like a 4,000 square foot house, or maybe a 700 square foot house, or it's a duplex or a triplex. You know, you have to go farther back in time and wider in radius. So I usually do, for the typical single family home, I do the same zip code or same schools, half a mile radius, plus or minus 10% on square footage and lot size, and the same beds and bath. It's pretty typical.
Awesome.
But yeah, usually about an hour is what I spend pricing and pulling stats before a listing appointment.
That's awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Dan. Scott, what are you thinking about the pricing and how you would go about that right now? What are your initial steps?
Well, I think underpricing, expecting any kind of multiples is kind of off the table, which has been a strategy for years now. But you can't really do that right now. You know, my strategy is to price it where you think the value is. And to me, something that can't be undervalued is the current pendings. Yeah, I go back 3 months. I do a lot of the same things that Dan just described, but you know, we can talk all day about where to price it, but if you don't know the value, none of it matters. So to get a real accurate value right now, it's not so hard because there's such limited inventory. You can really pinpoint the best comps and you can call the agents. What I didn't want to say to undervalue is the value that you can get from the other agents that are on the market right now, or the ones that are pending, is to me the most valuable information that you can have. And certainly to be able to recite that information to your sellers. So when if you know every little thing or all the details about the pending sold, certainly what they're in contract for, or a good close range, but also if they had any issues, if there were anything weird about commissions or repairs that somebody had to take care of, any kind of information that you can have like that. When you lay out 6 or 10 comps for your clients and you're able to speak to each one of them in detail, there's nothing that's more powerful to me in your pricing conversation than that. So,
So before you go further, I just want to ask, what is it? What is your script that you start off with to ask these agents who have listings that are pending? When you give them a call, what do you say?
Well, first, I introduce myself and tell them who I'm with. So we're credible brokerage, credible agent. And then I tell them exactly what I'm doing. Look, you have a listing right now that is a comp for me. I'm trying to figure out how to price mine. You know how difficult that can be in this environment. Please tell me anything that you can about, first of all, where did you sell? First, I ask for the exact number. Mm-hmm. Probably more than half the agents give me the exact number.
That's great.
The other ones that, if they're real shy about that, I make them give me a range. Were you north of 1.4? Were you south of 1.5, 1.45? Those kinds of questions, get it. So I'm within a $20,000 price point. And how many disclosures did you send out? How many offers did you get? Was there anything unusual about the inspection reports? And I make notes right on my MLS sheets for each one of those listings. Mm-hmm. And that's what I take with me is my handwritten notes.
That's great.
Yeah. There's an art to it, but it's just a conversation, and when agents are really buttoned up, you just say, I kind of lean into them as to, hey, this is tough on everybody right now. This is important for us. And sharing information is critical. And, and you're going to want that at some point as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great tactic, because I found that when I call agents and I talk to them, they're usually very helpful. Yeah. And then when I receive the phone call, I try to be as helpful as I can too, because our community is really very small, right?
Yeah.
and so they'll remember you, because I remember a few agents too, right? Yeah. So it's good. So please continue, Scott.
Yeah, I didn't, that was kind of what I was getting at, was just about, we talk about underpricing, overpricing, but really understanding the true value of that property is key. Mm-hmm. It's super important. And then in terms of pricing, it's always different. If you were pricing at the end of last summer, you had to be very conservative in your pricing. If you were coming out in January or February this year, was white hot. So you could price kind of anywhere you wanted to, and I would always suggest going low, because we could almost count on 20 disclosure packages and 6 offers.
Right. Right.
So it's a fluid market. You always just have to be. That's why these sessions are important. Mm-hmm. You got to stay on top of it. All of our discussions. We have that top talent mastermind that talks about where the market's going and what everybody thinks, and that's real valuable information to, if you read the shift number 7, like I did.
Thank you.
So knowing where the market is going, or having some kind of impression about where the market is going, is so important.
Right.
And so difficult right now.
It is. It's really difficult, right? Because our normal indicators, we can't really tell, because there's not enough. I mean, it looks like, and like Dan, how you were saying, it looks like, there's not that big of a change, and that when we come out of it, that people, you know, the market is going to pick up, and I bet it's going to be, my thought is that it's going to be like busy, right? Like our normal spring market is just being pushed out until we get out of the shelter. So, you know, while we're in this twilight zone type of a period, right? What are you suggesting for pricing and for making offers for clients, right?
Got a
Dan.
question?
Yeah. Who wants to answer that?
Ladies first. Go ahead, Jalayne.
Oh, okay. Well, and also part of the conversation that I'm having too is I'm really looking at what's active out there, and not necessarily how long it's. In of course, days on market are going down, but just looking at the date it's listed. So if there's property out there that's been listed since prior to shelter in place and it hasn't sold, that's something I'm pointing out to the seller, saying, look, this property in the neighborhood, whether we've seen it or not, have you seen it? Look, this is where it was listed at this price, no price, with or without price reductions. So what you can expect is potentially that if we go out at this price or higher, this is your competition. And there's also going to be pent up demand and pent up listings, because we all have listings now. I think, I don't know, what do you guys think? But I think there's just going to be this surge of listings that come on on May 1st, if not the end of April. I kind of suspect people are going to be listing end of April in anticipation of the May 8th or whatever lifting of the shelter in place, just to get at that market exposure and build, kind of building up a momentum. What was the question, Edith? I'm sorry, I was rambling.
That's okay. No, it was good what you were saying. So what I want to know, are there any, thank you, Jalayne. Are there any questions right now or any comments that anybody would like to share before we go into the psychology of working with your sellers?
Well, Kristen posted one on the chat board. That is a very, very good one. It says, how do you handle a client who wants to price high in this market? Do you try and put a timeline on how long before addressing a price reduction?
That's a great question.
It certainly is. And it's a tough one to answer. For me, it depends on how high they're talking about. Yeah. I don't really take listings that I think I have an unrealistic seller. Now, I know everybody's got a different opinion about that, but I really don't. I think it's going to be a waste of time. It really depends on the combination of what they think the price point is and their motivation. Now, do they have to sell? And you better be reading body language and everything you've got to find out their true motivation. Because if they don't have to sell and they want a price high, I don't really have time for that.
Well, and I was going to say, so this particular situation it's somebody who's wanting to sell what they had purchased as kind of their vacation home until they realized they couldn't do short-term rentals. So they do have to sell. But, they definitely have to sell at a certain price to kind of recoup. They just bought this property, maybe a little over a year ago. So that's the scenario here, but it's in a area that doesn't have a lot of activity. So it's kind of a little bit harder to price.
Yeah. I mean, my opinion on it is, pretty close to what Scott said. If it's slightly overpriced, then, you can kind of almost go with the I told you so mentality of, they priced it a little high. You say, okay, well, I think that's a little on the high side. It's probably going to sit on the market a little bit longer. Keyword being probably, because you never know. And then you look like an idiot, if it ends up selling over asking. But, you say, it's probably going to sit on the market a little bit longer, but we can give it a shot if that's really what you want to do, based on showing you the stats. I think it's high, but we can give it a shot. And then, if it goes a week or two, you can kind of reevaluate, but 100% what Scott said. And this is both for buyers and sellers. If you have an unrealistic buyer or seller, don't even waste your time. And, you know, whether you're a super busy experienced agent or you're a brand new agent, trust me, it is not worth dragging yourself through the mud trying to hold on to a listing or a buyer that you think will one day end up being a transaction, and it actually ends up costing you money. I think it was Gary that said it. It's three good clients is equivalent to the time spent on one bad client. So if you figure you just drop the ones that aren't realistic, then, you know, it frees up a lot more time. But yeah, I mean, that's a tough one. If they only bought it a year ago, you know, you have to think about it pretty much right off the bat. They're going to lose, you know, about 7% on the price just from closing cost of the sale. You know, with you know, county transfer taxes and, you know, agent fees and everything. But yeah, I mean, it kind of just depends upon how far outside of that zone. I mean, are they trying to make a profit? And knowing that now they know it can't be sold as a short-term rental, so don't they feel like that would have lowered the price for them if they were buying it? So maybe that's a point to bring up.
Sure. Okay. Thank you.
Hey, one more thing, Kristen. You know, you had said that they need a certain price point or else they can't do it. Or, you know.
Well, I mean, they probably would do it, but I just think, you know, though it's one of those situations where the husband's having a hard time letting it go to begin with. But the wife is definitely like, we need to do this. So I think in his mind, you know, he has a price, right, that will take the sting away. But yeah, I mean, I just think now with this change and what's happening in the world, it's just a little scarier if he wants to kind of go higher.
Have you asked them where they think the market's going to go after this?
We haven't talked a lot about that. I mean, we've touched on it, but I don't think they really know. But I think that they probably would be more open to not overpricing it, especially in this scenario. So
sure. I mean, if they think the market's going to go down in the future, then that's a good thing to talk about. You know, it's different if they think it's going to go up after this. And if you feel like it's going to go up after this, but, you know, if you just simply ask them the question of, you know, where do you think the market's going to go? You know, if this shelter in place continues and all of a sudden all these listings hit the market at the same time, if it gets lifted, do you think the price is going to go up or down? And if they say down, then, you know, okay, we should probably, you know, reduce the price a little bit and get it sold quickly before everybody else does the same thing.
Sure.
I love that you're having the sellers as part of the conversation and the decision making, right? So that they're totally consciously aware of what it is that they're choosing. And then also when there are sellers who want to price really high and you know that that is not a really reasonable price, then there's something called buying the listing, right? It's like you're agreeing to take the listing even though you disagree with the price that the sellers want, but you know that you want that listing. So there's a couple of things that happen when you overprice a listing. And one of those things is, you know, the seller's expectation, which Dan kind of touched on there. And then the other is, you know, if they're waiting for a certain price and offers come in that are not that price and they turn it down, they're basically, and as Gary Keller wrote, they're basically buying back the house, right? Like if they're not willing to sell the house at the price or the value that the buyer is offering or that you can negotiate to comfortably, then they're buying back the house in the hopes that they're going to be able to sell it with another offer. And we never know if another offer is coming in. So, you know, the thing to look at is what is the cost of keeping the property? And is that, you know, going to cover their desire to make a certain amount of money, and will that balance out? Jalayne?
Very good.
Yeah, no,
Okay.
just definitely, Kristen, just have 3 or 4 net sheets at different price points as part of your arsenal of that conversation.
Right.
What is the true net for at these different price points? Just because I don't think people really understand that that you sell at this price, but that's not going to be necessarily the money that you're making.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Scott, you know, you deal with a lot of investment properties. How would you approach this topic with the client?
It's a tough one. I would Now, just so I'm clear though, they're thinking about selling the investment property, not their primary, right?
That's correct. Yeah, this is their vacation home.
Where is it? Just out of curiosity.
It's in La Selva Beach.
Okay. So yeah, there aren't a lot of listings in Selva.
Nope.
You know, I think unfortunately you just have to share with them that, hey, you know what, it's in a very unusual time. You're getting caught in a weird circumstance, but you know, you just have to look at what the true loss might be. I think Jalayne's suggestion of 3 different net sheets is a great idea, because you kind of want them, I would want to be preparing them to stomach a loss, but really looking hard at what a potential loss might look like. You know, is that, you know, 20 grand? Is it 50 grand? And how much does that really impact their lives?
Sure.
You know, to try and kind of lessen the blow and present a little bit bigger picture. Now, you know, especially in Selva Beach, I think going out with a high price would be a challenge. You know, I certainly would be steering them away from that. And I think another comment, I forget who it's from, is lining up what their true costs are on that property. You know, if it sits on the market for another 4 or 5 months and their costs on it are $6 grand a month,
yep,
wouldn't that kind of balance it out? And you know, if you're looking a little bit into the future, and if you price high, that's likely what you're looking at. So
Right.
monetize.
No, that's a great point.
Yeah, monetizing that downside by just sitting on the market, you know, it's not just a value, but we all know that accumulative days on market is eventually really going to hurt you, and you're going to start to see some real lowball offers, if any. So if you just say, hey, and kind of, I won't say a worst case scenario, but if you say, hey, the kind of the max loss if we sell it at this price is out of pocket 30 grand, that's certainly what you're going to be looking at if you sit on this for 3 or 4 months.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you, Scott.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for that question, Kristen. So does anybody else have a question or a comment? No? Okay. So, you know, I want to talk about like the sellers and, you know, your interaction with them and how you deal with them, and what kind of, you know, what kind of issues might come up with your seller during this time, like, you know, wanting to have them vacate the property, or what is it that you're telling your sellers right now when they're putting their house on the market and you've got them to price where you want it to be? What strategies are you using with your seller and then with marketing, things like that? So Dan, you go first.
Well, we have 4 listings that are signed and ready to go, and they're all occupied and they can't leave. So we're literally waiting until the shelter in place is up. So yeah, I mean, that's, I don't know if I'm the best person to answer that specifically, because, you know, we don't have anything that's going to be going on the market, but we did have one a couple weeks ago that we did get into contract right after the SIP. And like I said earlier, we only got 4 showings. We got 1 offer. And it was his viewpoint on it was that if he doesn't sell now, it's going to get worse. So the pricing conversation was a little bit easier. Thankfully, we got over asking, but it wasn't much.
Mm-hmm. So what was the conversation that you had with the sellers of the 4 listings that made them decide that they want to wait till after the SIP is lifted?
Well, they're all moving out of the area.
Okay.
And a couple of them are actually leaving California. So, I mean, it's one of them, they're elderly, you know, they're in their 80s. So that's like a no questions asked. We're not showing it during, you know, this time. And I mean, frankly, even after the fact is a little bit iffy. Thankfully, they are moving to Colorado, and their new place that they're buying closes at the beginning of May. So they'll be moving then. So that will make it easier, obviously. But yeah, so I mean, that was a little bit different conversation than the other one where one of our clients is moving to LA, and they haven't bought anything yet. So they're just going to be moving. So they probably will end up just moving out of the area for a couple weeks while we put it on the market once the shelter in place is up. And they didn't want to go on the market before the shelter in place was up. So, I mean, it all pretty similar conversations with all those listings was they want to wait. And I have 2 other buyers I was actively showing before the shelter in place, and they're also hitting the pause button.
And what is the reason why for the buyers that they're hitting pause?
They just don't want to expose themselves to the virus, so they're hitting the pause button.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you, Jalayne. Go ahead.
Yeah. So the conversation. So they're all different because the motivations are different. One is we had a plan in place for this family to do what Scott did. You know, they were going to vacate to their new home for about 10 days and then move back because their daughter was graduating from high school. And so this very elaborate, very well orchestrated plan completely shot out of the water. But their conversation with them is, I believe, we'll see. We haven't talked numbers yet because they're not, now that the plan has changed, they're moving out permanently, but so they're packing up and leaving, and it's a long process, lots of stuff. So very emotional for them, long-time house, you know, family house, their kids are very emotional about it. So I think that's what I'm experiencing with people is just everyone's heightened emotionally. So just if we can approach them just a little with kindness is what I don't really get into stats and stuff, but we just talk about how are you doing? You know, what, and really addressing what their needs are. What do you need? We need extra time. Okay. We're concerned about once we do leave that once we get on the market, what's the market going to be like because we can't afford 2 mortgages. So that's one conversation I'm having with a seller. However, I do anticipate that they will be unrealistic with their price. So I'm gathering data. That's what I've been doing. And when we get ready to have that conversation, and really set that schedule, that I will be a little bit more data driven then. But for now, it's just really, just checking in with people, making sure they're okay, and motivating them to move quickly. So we are ready when the shelter in place is lifted. Then I have another gentleman who, in prepping the house, he's taking his time. It's kind of ridiculous. And it's vacant. It's like, it could be done. I keep telling, and I've been pushing on him to get it done because I know he's going to want his price. And he just, while we were on the call, he just texted me. I referred him to another agent to buy another property in Oakland, and his fiance found another agent. So it's just kind of, people are rogue. This guy's rogue. But I know that's going to be a difficult conversation with him because he's got a solid look. This is what my property's worth. And I've been reinforcing with him. We're doing everything possible to get it ready and show its best as possible. So we can get top dollar, but again, I'm gathering data for him. And interestingly enough, the house next to his is listed as well. So that's going to be, I'm being honest with them, is like, it's going to be a challenge to get this sold when you've got the one next door that's bigger and very similar, coming on the market as well. So it's my approach with sellers is in pricing and getting it ready is really been to take care of them as people. That's just what I've been doing.
That's awesome. Thank you, Jalayne. Shannon, you've got your hand up.
I actually had something to comment about what Jalayne was saying about her client, but I forgot.
So you forgot. Okay, good. Well, thank you for participating. Oh, you have your hand raised again.
Oh, I just lowered it. Sorry.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Jalayne. Scott, how are you? How are you dealing with your clients, and how are you doing your strategies?
My tact isn't really that much different other than, sharing with them the realities, what we're learning on a daily basis. But my conversations always are very frank. And this is no different. This time period's no different. My clients tend to be very smart, I think, too. they're knowledgeable about the market, about the economy. And so we don't, you know, there's no pulling punches. We just talk about the realities of it, and, you know, and really speak to what the probable and potential outcomes are, and how those look, you know. And earlier I would have said to Kristen, you know, I would have probably asked them, what happens if we don't sell it at that price? You know, it's an ugly conversation, but it's something you'd want to know and you'd want them to think about, and to be open communication. And generally people will respect that. And, you know, but I really would want to know, you know, are you not going to sell that house? Because that's information I need too. But otherwise, my dialogues, other than current events, haven't changed. The tone of them hasn't changed.
So it sounds like, okay, thank you, Scott. So it sounds like when we're getting ready to price a listing, you know, the norm is to go back 90 days. But what we're really looking at is, yeah, go back the 90 days to see what prices have done. Look and see what's happening in the market. For example, which prices have been reduced. And then to call the listing agents who have pending sales, so that we can get a real accurate pricing, correct? Uh-oh.
Correct, yeah.
Oh, okay, good.
That's so super important.
Right, okay, good. And then what we want to do is be able to have a conversation, a frank, honest conversation with our clients about the reality of what the pricing would result in, right? Like, would we have it on the market for a longer time? You know, would they get any offers? Would it sell quickly, right? So we're doing that, right? And then we have like, what is, you know, what we recommend for them to do in preparation of the property before we can go on the market. So what kind of things would you guys be doing then for, and I know it's, so it sounds like none of you guys right now have any listings that you've put out during this time period, correct?
Correct.
Right. Just that one, but that was, I mean, we're closing in a couple days, so.
Yeah, because that's the one that had come out like the 17th, the actual day we went into shelter. Okay.
Yeah, something like that.
Okay, great. And then Scott, do you have any that are active right now?
No, only contingent, pending contingent.
Okay, cool. All right. So then, so, you know, that kind of shows you something, right? Like, you know, these guys who are killing it with listings, you know, they don't have actives during this market right now. So that's something to really look at. Does anybody have any questions or comments?
So I wanted to share something really quick, just about when this thing first started happening. And people were talking about this being the bubble bursting and all of that. Just to give you a historical perspective, I would recommend researching in the past market shifts, what happened. So if you go back, the 1984 or the 1990 shift was an 11% decline overall, occurred over a period of 4 years. And then in 2001, the .com decline, it was a 1-year decline, was 10%. And then the 2008 financial crisis, that was another 3 years, 2008 to 2011, that was a 27% decline. However, all of these, then the increase coming out of those declines, like from the .com, since that was a year decline, which I think is more similar to if we do get a decline or see a decline in prices, I think it'll be shorter than a year, in my opinion, but just for sake of data, once we pop, for buyers and sellers, once we pop out of that year cycle, then it took an increase of 59% over 5 years. So values increased almost 60%.
Wow.
After coming out of these. Yeah. So just to go back even further, so out of the 1991-94 recession, prices increased from 95 to 2001, 100%. And then the .com came out of that for the next 5 years, again, another 60% increase. And then we are unprecedented again with coming out of the financial crisis. So that's another conversation I'd be having with both sellers and buyers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Jalayne.
Sure.
On the chat,
Jalayne, Edith, I'm sorry.
who was that?
It's Susanna. I'm on the call again. I couldn't do video today. I'm sorry.
Okay.
But I have a question for Jalayne based on what she just said.
Sure.
Just quickly, Jalayne, do you have an actual graph? Ferry had a graph that was really cool. Didn't include, I don't think it included .com, but it was a really nice graph showing the impact on the market based on the events and then what happened in terms of appreciation soon after. Do you have them in graphs, or is it like an article that you were reading?
I was researching our article. I just the graph I was looking at, you can see, I just put it in the chat.
Oh, that's awesome.
Oh, awesome. Okay.
Can you access that?
Thank you very much.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jalayne. Thank you.
Yeah, this looks like it's from another agent's website.
Just copy and make it your own.
Awesome. Thank you.
Well, and these, that's exactly what they did. This data, the graphs in this link, I've seen elsewhere. I just couldn't find that source.
Yeah, thank you. So Jenna has a question. I'm looking at comps for a condo in downtown San Jose. Comps are listed all over the place, almost 200K difference between them. I've talked to a few of the agents and none are getting activity, even at the low price point, wondering your thoughts on if I should wait to sell or move forward with inspections and keep an eye on things for a few weeks and see what happens. The sellers are motivated. Who would like to address that?
How big is the condo? Is it a 2-1 bedroom?
It's just 2-room, 1 bath, but it is small. It's like 700 square feet.
Yeah, that shouldn't be a problem. My opinion would be, is it vacant or occupied?
Vacant.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, my opinion would be to list it. I mean, I think we're closely approaching where it's probably going to make sense to put it on the market. I mean, we're only 2.5 weeks away, and by the time you do inspections, you'll be only a week early.
Mm-hmm.
If it was a 1-bedroom, I would probably say wait, just because 1-bedrooms tend to sit on the market a little bit longer. They're not in the ideal buyer's pool. But my opinion would be to list it. As far as the pricing goes, I mean, 200,000 difference is quite a bit. In downtown San Jose, I mean, you're probably talking about like Axis or the 88 or those kind of comparisons versus something more like a McEwen. What kind of place is it?
It's like an old Victorian that was converted into condos. So there's only 6 units in the building. So it's not like a huge building with a huge HOA. The HOA is the lowest I've seen in downtown, but doesn't have like a pool or gym or anything like that. But it's a really great location. A few blocks from San Pedro Square, a few blocks from Japantown. Be really good for a rental or first-time home buyer.
Is it rentable?
Totally. Most of the units in the building or a lot of the units in the building are rentals.
Well, that might become an issue if there's
financing.
Yeah, you might.
Okay.
Yeah, you might have an issue with financing. I would find that out first, because that changes your marketing, plan.
Mm-hmm.
If it's not rentable, then you're looking at somebody who's, obviously wanting to live in it. So the 200,000 difference, it seems like that's a lot. What were your comparables?
The lowest one was at 580, and then the highest was at 790, I believe.
And what kind of compare were they? Were you looking at in the high-rise condos, or are you looking at ones that are more condo-esque?
Yeah, so more like condo-esque, though. Like Ryland Muse, if you know where that is, there's the comp there. That one's priced really low. That one's like the 580.
Where were the higher ones?
Higher one.
So you guys, Jenna and Dan.
On Julian.
Jenna and Dan.
We can take this offline.
Yeah, let's take this offline. Thank you so much. So we thank you, Dan, for helping her with that. So we have just a few minutes. What would you like? What would you like your closing words to be to encourage everyone out there, you know, to still go for the listings if they can, feel confident in their pricing? What would you like to say? Jalayne, let's start with you.
Oh gosh, I hadn't thought about that.
It's okay. It can be real quick because we just have a few minutes anyway.
I would remind people that, you know, real estate is the foundation for wealth for all of us. Whatever, you know, making sure their motivation is, you know, what is your motivation? Why are you selling? You know, that motivations for people to buy and sell, you know, it still exists. Those needs still exist. So I would focus on allaying their fears, you know, finding out whatever they are and encouraging them that, you know, moving towards, you know, rather than, what's the phrase, you know, moving towards pleasure rather than, you know,
moving away from
pain.
pain. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So just focus on the move towards the pleasure, move forward. You will only benefit in the long run.
And moving towards pleasure, it's tourist season that's coming up, and that's all about pleasure. So
yes.
Thank you, Jalayne. Dan.
I mean, I would point it to the stock market. You know, if you look at where the stock market's gone, where it is now, I mean, I think we hit a low of about 19,000 with the Dow, and you know, we're back up to 23,500. So I mean, that's been a pretty big low. So with the we're back up to 23,500. So I'm getting reverb here. Sorry, I was getting reverb for some reason. But yeah, I mean, just, you know, kind of pointing that to the client about, well, that was somebody else on here. Somebody's got to mute themselves. So, you know, yeah, so pointing to the stock market, pointing to the client about down and now it's back up. You know, I think that's, you know, probably going to follow pretty close with the real estate market. And just staying, you know, fairly on track with where your things are at from a listing standpoint. I mean, I think it is going to be a little blip that we've had, and you know, I don't think it's going to be anything like it was the recession in, you know, 07. And you know, you just staying, you know, fairly on track with a blip. I don't think it's going to be anything like, I don't know what is going on. The recession, and you know, is anybody else getting that?
Yes.
The host should be able to mute everyone, and then you can unmute yourself there.
Yeah, that's. There we go. Right, is that better? Is that better? I'm still getting feedback.
How's that? Because I have.
All right. Anyways, yeah, I'll. It's real bad on my side. I can't even talk with it.
Well, you know what? Now you can. Now we could hear you. I muted everybody.
Oh, there you go. Okay. But yeah, just using this time to do things like inspections. You know, you can take your time doing a lot of these things that you normally would have to rush through. You know, making sure your disclosures are all filled out really well, getting awesome photos, doing some really awesome marketing things on Facebook or Instagram. So yeah, just utilizing this time that we, you know, typically don't have, you know, because we're busy, to spend a little bit more time on those things.
That's great. Thank you so much, Dan. And then Scott, what would you like to say?
I would remind people that that even though these are uncertain times, I'd speak to the history and the inventory, the ridiculously low inventory that we have, and that that this, you know, even though we don't know where all this is going, you do not have a lot of competition out there right now. Certainly for that condo that was just discussed from Jenna, I would be putting it on too. You know, that yes, like Jalayne said, this real estate's a long-term play. I tell all my buyers, there are still buyers in the market. Right now, there are only serious buyers. You might not get the same kind of exposure that you normally would, but when you do get attention, it's going to be very serious attention. And, you know, work with me and you're going to be successful.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you, Scott Poncetta, Dan Sullivan, and Jalayne Forrester for doing such a fabulous job and, you know, guiding us and answering our questions when it comes to pricing ahead of the market and discussing your seller strategies. I so appreciate it. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for your questions. And, you know, go out there, do your care
Thanks,
calls,
guys.
look for
Yeah.
business. Have a beautiful day.
Bye, guys. Thank you. Thank you, Edith.
Thank you
You're
so much.
welcome.
That was awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank
Thank you.
Thank you, Edith. Thank you, everyone.
Thank
You're
you,
welcome.
Edith, and thank you, Jalayne.